and that produced a bunch of kids. And just to kind of point out what I'll call these are all fairly commonsensical, but fundamentally ridiculous. So here's one from Gordon. He's not a demographer, but this is Robert Gordon, his big book that just came out, which is quite good, but an astute watcher of the American economy. The temporary rise in fertility rate during the baby boom period is best viewed as a change in tastes for raising children, caused more than anything by hardship imposed by the Great Depression of World War II. So that's some kind of combination, right, that was put together through these two theories. Okay, so there's some problems with this. The first one, I don't know if I put it up there, but the first one for the Easterling theory is you have a lot of problematic microeconomic problems. Meaning, so he's looking at all this from the level of the nation state and these kind of high level statistics that get broken down by kind of Weberian categories. But when you do kind of comparisons on with individuals that went through it, it doesn't work, right? You try to compare early life, what incomes they had as children growing up relative to what they had later on, and usually they use parents' income and things like this. It doesn't work. That's a problem. A lack of, these are really, the desire for children, of course, is not equal capacity. There's the kind of demography thing. But a lack of a really unified theory. All the theories that they have, this is the problem with association and causation, right? There's so many things happening all at once. What's the one that we pick out and we say that that's the cause? And I don't think they do a very good job of giving us a causal explanation. All of these, as I was intimating before with Easterling, happen at this level of the nation state. But economies don't produce children. Incomes don't produce children. People produce, people do, and social relation, and they come out of social relations in which we're all headed. They also don't consider the cost of social reproduction, and they don't talk about different household formations and social relations and benefits. So gender gets left out. Right, gender relations get left out. The difference between a highly proletarianized working class home and a farming community gets left out, for example. This is just yeah. So there's some things that we need to think about when we're talking about the boom. First of all, it actually wasn't as boomy as it was supposed to be, right? So the number they always quote is 3.6 as a birth rate. But the total fertility is actually 3.2, so it's a little lower, not a lot, but it's significant that this is what we always get kind of quoted. And this is because of the way that calculation works, and because of what they call, and this is the last point on here, compressed fertility. So what happens with this is basically more people were having children much earlier in life, closer together. And that's why that metric is off. There's extremely high rates of marriage. This doesn't get left out, of course, of the boom theories, but this is really, really important. The percent of women that were between, kind of prime fertility age, this is demographer language, thank you, was 72%, up 10% from the 1920s. 95% of men and women that came of age during the post-war era were married at some point in their lives. That's astounding. And also, people were actually having an average number of children. So in earlier periods, there was about a fifth of American women in the United States wouldn't have had any children at all. And another fifth would have had 5 or more. That wasn't happening. It was, people were, couples and women were having about an average number of children. That was slightly higher. So what we really need to talk about, instead of the volume of kids and how fast they were coming and all this, is the number of parents that existed. So the real question is so these are an average couple is having an average number of kids, and there's just a bunch more of them. My argument is that this is because of proletarianization, the form of proletarianization that happens through the Second World War and during the post-war period, this form of proletarianization that encouraged household formation and of a specific kind, namely kind of the Fordist household, with and enforce heteronormativity. And of course, this along with rights and wages. So we know that marriage and fertility for proletarians are highly linked, and proletarian fertility is different than farm fertility. Rural women typically had children much longer throughout their lives than proletarian women did. They had them later as well, because you had to have access to part of the farm deal, right? You had access to land to form a household, and those are closely linked. And proletarianization is just totally ignored. The role of proletarianization of proletarians, the fact that these were proletarians that were being born, and these were proletarian households, is completely and utterly ignored by the literature, especially for the post-war period. A guy like Tilly will talk about it for the demographic transition through 1900, so about everybody else, but it's not talked about. Proletarianism talked about in the post-war context. Oops, what was that? I don't know. So when we talk about the post-war baby boom, we need to talk about proletarian fertility, and namely that proletarians were at the center of this fertility, of this big change in kind of fertility. Most households in the U.S. were in fact proletarian ones. You have 90% of the workforce engaged in non-agricultural labor by 1960. You also have a vast decline in the number of farms, and most new household formation, which is really important for producing children, because in this period, right, when we're having children younger, people were getting married younger. All this new household formation, thank you, happens in early life. So, and all of that household formation is happening really in the urban sectors, because people are leaving agrarian sectors. It's been happening for a very long time. But it's worth pointing out, given the literature. Okay, this is just pointing out that, why did that happen? That should have happened. Huh, that's unique. I must have clicked the wrong one. Well, I only have 2 minutes anyways. So, what I was going to point out here is, this just points out the fact that it was in fact proletarian women that had higher fertility rates, and especially high school educated women, which were the majority of women in the United States. So when we're talking about that, when we're talking about this fertility revolution, when you talk about proletarian fertility, the rest of my PowerPoint got cut off somewhere, and really would just did a quick rundown of what we're talking about when we're talking about the proletarian post-war household. And what we really mean is enforced heteronormativity and heterosexual unions. If you were a woman, it was much harder to to live on your own, access to credit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think we kind of probably all know this. Thank you, second wave feminism. But also, it was coupled with the state taking on more responsibility for social reproductive costs, especially schooling, which is really, really important. You have from 1930 to about 1940, 1950 in some cases, you have like a doubling of the high school educated population. So this is incredibly important for the number of people coming out. And also, thank you, and also the benefit, and this is some of the literature talks about this, the benefit of child income tax exemptions, which became important because more people were paying income tax in the post-war period. And of course the suburban home, etc. There was so I'm gonna end there before I ramble some more. So thank you all very much.
Next we have Mercedes Chavez from Ohio State University.
Thank you. All right. Close my PowerPoint really quickly. And while I'm here, I would like to just say thank you so much to our organizers. I'm really excited to be here today. And thank you to Binghamton University. So this paper comes mostly from my own personal observances becoming a mother in 2012 and again in 2015 as I embarked upon my PhD at The Ohio State University. On keyboard, there we go. These are my children here. So many of the parenting practices that I will discuss, such as cloth diapering, extended nursing, co-sleeping, and baby wearing, these are practices in which I myself engage. So I would like to just clarify that I'm not necessarily criticizing these practices in and of themselves, but instead what I'm doing is examining how these traditional parenting techniques have been adopted by mainstream capitalist enterprises as well as purportedly countercultural movements. So while one might assume that these mainstream and countercultural projects would be opposed to each other, they both seem to make these kind of similar claims to the natural, and by natural, I mean natural in quotation marks. Whenever I'm saying natural in nature, it's pretty much always in quotation marks, okay? So, and I want to examine too how these traditional child rearing practices are appropriated to bolster claims of the natural, and how this appropriation works to reinforce notions of non-white and indigenous peoples as closer to nature. So I'm going to turn to the mainstream first, specifically celebrity culture and the recent boom in motherhood as business venture. I'm a film scholar, which is my excuse for spending a lot of time on celebrity gossip sites. I love them. And I actually started reading them a lot when I was a stay-at-home mother myself. And so it was at that time in early 2012 when I noticed this growing proliferation of these motherhood-centric celebrity businesses. All right, so celebrities have been using their children for publicity, forever, basically. But the first decade of the 2000s saw this particular rise in baby mania, So in 2002, the tabloid Us Weekly popularized the term baby bump, referring to the supposedly telltale bulge of a woman's abdomen in the early stages of pregnancy. Very classy. All right, so, and then this bump watch, they call it bump watch, became a staple of gossip weeklies and blogs, where you speculate on whether or not a celebrity was pregnant or not, based on what she was wearing. Is she cupping her belly? So partly maybe in response to this tabloid baby mania, celebrities started not just to promote themselves through their children, but to also capitalize on their status as mothers by launching brands centered around maternity and parenting. For instance, in 2004, actress and anti-vaccine activist Jenny McCarthy released her pregnancy memoir, Belly Laughs, followed by 6 more parenting books. Soleil Moon Frye, the former child actress of Punky Brewster, if anybody remembers that, yes. All right, opened an environmentally friendly children's boutique called The Little Seed in 2007. Actress and neuroscientist Dr. Mayim Bialik of Blossom and The Big Bang Theory wrote her own parenting advice book, Beyond the Sling, which I'll return later to her, but she wrote that in 2012. And so you might note from this very brief list, there's a lot more of these businesses out there, that celebrities with personal mommy branded businesses, and that's not a pejorative, that they're frequently called mommy businesses. These celebrities tend to be Caucasian, cisgender, heterosexual, and well under 50. So basically Hollywood, right? And while these celebrities' ventures vary from books to belly bands, they're frequently united by their embrace of natural and, self-professedly green practices. So one notable exception to the overwhelming whiteness of the market is Mexican-American actress Jessica Alba's The Honest Company. Alba's company is the most successful of the celebrity motherhood businesses, valued by the Wall Street Journal at $1.7 billion in 2015. All right, that's a lot of money, right? So The Honest Company sells diapering products at significantly higher rates than conventional disposables. They start at 35 cents per diaper versus a comparable Pampers brand diaper, which is going to be 25 cents per diaper. And the higher cost may be due to the sourcing of their products' ingredients. This map comes from their website. If you go to the diapers, you can scroll down and it's got this map here that shows where all of the products come from, So they pride themselves on transparency. That's why it's The Honest Company. And this seems to illustrate that, this big transparency kind of thing. But it also highlights the company's connection to foreign nations, with for instance, you have ingredients from Finland and then also Nuevo León and Puebla, Mexico. So, what you can do is you can look at this map and you can purchase the Honest Company's products and feel good about supporting a global fair trade economy that extends past the US and Europe to the global south as well. So while this fairly sourced ingredient pricing no doubt contributes, there's also this inflated price to the Honest Company diapers that I think is connected to their aesthetics as well. So here on the left, these are some kind of trendy cloth diaper covers that have come into vogue. You can see that they're brightly patterned. And the Honest Company's diapers, these are disposables, by the way. The Honest Company does not sell cloth diapers. They have very similar kind of look with these patterns, and that sets them apart from other diaper companies. So you can buy, fragrance-free diapers from Pampers, but they look like regular Pampers. But then you buy the Honest Company, and everybody can see that you're wearing an Honest Company diaper. So I don't think that's just for branding. I think it also visually aligns them with a cloth diaper aesthetic. And this aesthetic seems to be no coincidence, as their website and their packaging is covered with claims of environmental friendliness, sustainable sourcing, freedom from additives. Their website boasts no health-compromising toxins, and they sell eco-friendly disposable diapers. You will note that eco-friendly is starred to specify that they're made with naturally derived, plant-based, and sustainable materials. They're not actually biodegradable. So, they're just like a regular disposable diaper, essentially. So consumers are given the convenience of a disposable diaper with the aesthetics and ease of mind that an environmentally friendly diaper can offer, despite the inevitable waste involved, all right? So Alba's Honest Company may be the most recognizable celebrity mother business, but it was not the first. That was actually Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. So that's a newsletter and a website. It's got a store. It's a lifestyle brand. It launched in 2008. It's been tremendously successful. And while she doesn't focus specifically on motherhood, it's part of her brand. There's a parenthood section on Goop that has articles on paid family labor and kids astrology, And she also recently launched to great fanfare and furor, if you've been reading the news lately, a wellness section which features vitamin subscriptions that start at $75 per month if you subscribe, $90 if you just want to buy 1 month. And she has a vitamin supplement there, which is a natal supplement called the Mother Load, which promises to revive mothers both, quote, new and not so new, which is interesting, expanding, when you become a mother. So, this might be due to her kind of expanding her brand to cover all aspects of female life. And unlike the Honest Company, Goop doesn't really focus heavily on that sustainability and greenness kind of component, though it is part of something that they'll put in with the product, this is fair trade, this comes from here, But she does focus, the site, it's Paltrow's site, she's very closely associated to it. It focuses more on personal health as related to nature. For instance, Goop's recommendation to stand barefoot in earth or soil. This is known as earthing therapy. And they say that it can be a cure for, quote, everything from inflammation and arthritis to insomnia and depression. So it would seem that those without the means or access to shoes would be the happiest people on earth. But despite its seeming indifference to its own privilege, Goop does lean progressive in its politics, featuring links to articles on the dangers of global warming and even feminist critiques. And maybe it is that progressive character that encourages their openness to alternative practices, because Goop traffics heavily in these discourses of the natural through vague references to Eastern medicine and alternative medicine. For instance, the most controversial product in Goop's wellness store, you've probably heard of it, is the jade egg. So it's a jade egg that's meant to be inserted into the vagina to, quote, increase sexual energy, health, and pleasure, connecting the second chakra, the heart, and the yoni for optimal self-love and well-being. So Goop provides very little indication on how this is actually achieved. And I think what they're doing is perhaps relying on Orientalist tropes to kind of fill in those gaps for you, And this vague approach is mirrored in many ways through their terminology as well. Let's see, do I have that slide on there? There I had it, okay. So you can see up here, like, the different kind of sections. So there's like clean beauty, goop wellness, detox. There's a lot of these terms there. Toxins, and I'm not talking about like the scientific term toxin, but kind of like that vague wellness term. All right. And interestingly, Alba's The Honest Company also features a wellness section with vitamins and supplements. She just hasn't gotten the same kind of, uproar over it. So these terms like wellness, toxin, detox, they're household words today. A lot of us use them in our everyday life, particularly people from a certain segment of middle class. But their origins lie in practices of the aforementioned alternative medicine, such as homeopathy, or even in Eastern medicine. So homeopathy, the American Institute of Homeopathy defines the practice as a natural approach to the treatment of the sick. And Eastern medicine is based on traditional Chinese teachings of health, and like homeopathy, employs a holistic approach to the body, as well as using herbs or remedies that have either been unverified or sometimes dismissed by conventional science. Now, whether these practices actually work is not actually my concern. I'm not interested in entering into that debate. What interests me more is how these discourses of alternative medicinal disciplines have been adopted by these Western businesses like The Honest Company and Goop, all right, to bolster their alignment with nature, For in adopting these terminologies, these quote-unquote green celebrity ventures seek to align themselves with a concept of the natural that depends heavily on the figuration of non-Western, non-white, and indigenous people as closer to or part of nature. So as Maria Mies theorizes in her work, Colonization and Housewifization, I love that title, quote,